Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Shelley. Good morning. Thank you for joining.
Of course, thank you for putting this together.
Sure, sure. No, we have two of my favorite people. One I just met not too long ago, and one that I've known for a very long time. So it's going to be interesting. Okay, so we still got people joining. So Lizette, if you don't mind admitting, yes, thank you. Perfect. And we can start. So the recording is on, looking good. And one second. Let me hit stop share for 1 second. Okay, let's begin. So today we have two special guests. Sean Scanlan, Associate Professor at City Tech CUNY. Sean joined the City Tech English Department in 2010. Prior to arriving in Brooklyn, he lived in Iowa City, Iowa, and taught English at the University of Iowa and Kirkwood Community College. Sean is the founder and editor of the City Tech academic journal, Nano, New American Notes Online, an online peer-reviewed interdisciplinary publication. Nano publishes scholarly articles on special topics that range from navigation to digital humanities, from competition and play to the aesthetics of trash. Sean's teaching and research interests include U.S. and world literature, Gothic culture and literature, New York City history and literature, technical writing and editing, nonfiction, easy essay writing, narrative theory, science fiction, artificial intelligence, and digital homesickness. And our special guest from NYU, Lucy Appert, Senior Director, Arts and Science Office of Teaching Excellence and Innovation. Lucy provides leadership and planning for her office's innovative and purposeful use of technology for teaching and learning, drawing on her unique experience as both a faculty member and administrator to build inter and intra-institutional collaborations. She's an advocate for student-centered practices and increasing professional recognition and reward excellence in teaching. Prior to joining ANS, Lucy served as Associate Director of Instructional Design at Columbia University Center for Teaching and Learning, CTL, where she led the CTL's innovative project partnership with faculty. That's where I met Lucy at Columbia University. Previously, she served as a Director of Educational Technology for NYU's Liberal Studies program, where she led the team providing instructional technology solutions for faculty and students in NYU, in New York and at NYU global sites. An active member of the large educational technology community, Lucy speaks and writes about IT, academic collaboration, digital pedagogy, and open source practices. So those are two special guests today. I do want to talk real briefly on the housekeeping. The roundtable talk today will be recorded, so you can find it later on our YouTube channel. And we will have 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So please hold your questions till the end. And with that, I will turn it over to Sean and Lucy.
Thank you, Jose. It's so great to be back with you on the screen. It's just a great colleague from Columbia. And I'm grateful to everyone who came today. And I'm just so excited for the conversation with Sean. I'm going to start off with just a few context setting slides. And I'm going to hit my slides are here so everybody can see them, and I'm going to share my screen and just talk briefly through a couple of these. So, alternative grading is something that has been around for a long time, and is something that I think now, as more traditional forms of assessment are being destabilized, and because from AI, is getting a lot more attention. It also got a lot of attention during the pandemic, as you couldn't assess students in the same way. So I just want to do a little bit of context setting for our conversation today and say what we mean when we say alternative grading. It's basically just, this is a standard definition where you're really flipping over what you're doing for course grades to make sure that, to say that course grades are based on the learning activities and the fulfillment of those rather than just on their performance. Performing on a test or performing on a paper. So it's really more about the holistic process and whether they have fulfilled the learning objectives of the course. It also is sometimes called ungrading or contract grading. And there are two main forms that folks work with. The first one, contract grading, is where you have a contract or a set of requirements, and students' grades are based on their fulfillment of these requirements. Some people do points, some people do different types, different structures, but the grade, the students can see I do certain things, and then this is the grade that I get for doing these learning activities. And the point here is to help students to understand that the learning is happening through going through the process rather than just performance on events. The other, and the one that I think is relevant for today, is more about hybrid grading. So this is a mixture of traditional performance-based grades. So, you're going to do a performance, some type of activity that demonstrates learning, and edit to mastery. So where students they do a thing and then they're given feedback on where that puts them in terms of the learning objectives, and then they redo it until they have demonstrated mastery of the learning objectives. And that can happen on a whole course basis or just on an assignment basis. And I feel like a lot of folks are really interested in tweaking what they are doing now to incorporate some of this hybrid grading. They're not ready to go all in on creating a contract. So I'm just going to briefly, and you guys will have the slides that have a lot of resources in it, but I'll just set a larger context around what some of the tweaks that we're seeing now are. And then I think Sean's got some great examples from his own class about what he's thinking about. So edit to mastery, what I just mentioned, where you could do this on any type of assessment with paper or exam, and where students are able to get feedback either from their peers or from the instructor and work to revise what they've done to demonstrate their mastery of the learning objectives. And we would say that this is probably more authentic assessment because students are given the opportunity to show that they understand the standard and they can perform to this standard, rather than just kind of like they had one event, they had one chance to do it. And so if folks were going to think about doing, and I have several slides here that'll show you, if you're thinking about doing something like practice exams or draft feedback, you could take a traditional format for a class and take your 30% of final grade paper and divide it up into smaller percentages that gave students credit for doing these different pieces of the grade, and then the whole grade would be a composite. Same thing with an exam. And I have some slides to talk about kind of like how you might phase this in. The most important thing to think about is completion, not correctness. That's kind of what this whole system of alternative grading goes by, is that we want students to engage in that struggle of learning and trying and getting feedback and understanding, because that's really more what learning looks like. Another way to tweak your course would be to build out a category that you have as like participation 30%, but you don't really specify what that is. To build that out, to doing some entry and exit tickets that give you information or feedback on student learning, or have them do in-class writing or reflection, so that you're really actually giving some more substance to what participation looks like, and that becomes a larger component of the grade. And I have some examples also for how you can begin to structure the time that students do outside of class, to help them understand what the point of the assessment is. So what are you supposed to be getting out of watching this lecture? A lot of times students maybe have been watching videos for many years, but they don't really know what they are supposed to be getting from it. So you can add structure to a work by giving them a worksheet. Or sometimes people use knowledge checks. I think knowledge checks can be they're a little too much like a little test, like, did I do this right or not? But a worksheet that helps them kind of structure their thinking can be helpful too. And then I have some resources at the end of it. So I just wanted to go through this context for how you might get to alternative grading, rather than talking about this as like, this is the best way to do things, or it's philosophically the right thing to do, but instead to talk about it as, well, this is a spectrum that we can engage on. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who is engaging on this spectrum.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Give me some thumbs up. All right, great. Thank you. Let me go ahead and share a couple of slides to get going here. Hopefully I'm going to do this right. Let me know if you can or cannot see what's happening. You can see that, but hold on. I'm gonna go back because I wanna see my notes. Just 1 second. Give me a quick second here. I need to do this and then do this. Okay. Let me try sharing one more time. Am I sharing right now? No. Okay. All right. Let me do this one more time then. This should be it. Presenter view. All right. Can you see that? Yes? Can you see my notes?
Yes.
You
Yes.
can see my notes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, all right. Well, that was not exactly the intention.
That's okay.
So let me kind of, all right, it's fine. You can see my notes. I'll share those anyway later. But you could see the main slide. I'll make this smaller so it's not in the way totally. I also want to thank Jose for running this roundtable. Thank you, Lucy, for helping me with my assignment, and also thank you everybody for being here and watching, and look forward to your questions later. So I'm going to start with this short quote from this New Yorker article entitled "The End of the Essay" by Bard professor Hua Xu. And he asks, has there ever been a time in human history when writing was so important to the average person? We have emails, texts, social media posts, angry missives in comment sections, customer service chats, let alone one's actual work. And my own question is this key question at the top. Since we know that writing is important, will AI make original writing more valued or not? And Xu ends his article on a downer as he asks a very bright NYU student about 2 humanities papers that he has to finish before the end of the semester. The student decides to use Anthropic's Claude to write both. He receives an A- and a B+ on these 2 papers. And he says, and these are almost like the last 20 words of the whole article, he says, I didn't retain anything. And I couldn't tell you the thesis of either paper. Ha, 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 ha. And that to me was frightening, but not totally shocking, because this has happened in my class. And many of you watching, you may not be teachers of composition or in English, it could be a science, but you may have encountered a similar disturbing kind of reaction. So I'm going to turn off. Hopefully I can, if I click here, you can not see my notes so well. Is this better? Can you see my slide okay still? All right, great. So My project is a 5-week writing project entitled Creating a PSA with the Help of Generative AI. And my background was that I wanted students to be able to learn more about generative AI, to experiment with it, but to get outside of the idea that it's only a tool for cheating and to be less fearful about it. Now, I just want to say that this is a 5-week writing project, and that's a big project. And even somebody in the real working world might say, a 5-week project? How am I going to do that? So that was one of my initial problems, that there was too many deliverables and there's a lot going on. And so here are 5 of my deliverables: taking a reading quiz based on some readings we did about the history of AI. We developed a bibliography. Then we drafted a 300-word PSA with the help of with brief quotations. So this was a miniature research paper that I never mentioned the word research paper to the students. And then number 4, I've highlighted here that the students would write a comparison essay. They would compare their own PSA draft to 2 other drafts that they ran through ChatGPT. And specifically, they would ask Chat to make the PSA more advanced. For example, for a CEO, for a clinician, for a doctor, for a lawyer. And they would also ask ChatGPT to rewrite their PSA for a younger audience, or such as grade school or junior high or high school. And then this comparison essay would ask them to compare the 3 different versions. So they did one, and then Chat would kind of rewrite for different audiences. And then the last deliverable was a reflection essay, and I would give them 5 prompts that they would be able to like say, well, what do I reflect on? And so I was giving them a little bit of hand holding on the reflection essay. So my initial goals, I think, were fairly basic. I wanted to promote positive social behavior concerning Gen AI. I wanted students to learn about Gen AI through 7 different fairly decent quality sources. And then I wanted them to practice using ChatGPT safely and ethically. And students, of course, could use Gemini, or they could use Claude. And then 4th, they needed to practice writing, revising, reflecting, and resource building, which is part of our English course, or Composition 2 student learning outcomes. So that was always part of it. But I had secondary goals, and that's why this grew from 3 weeks to 5 weeks. I wanted to help students synthesize or metabolize new information in new ways. And I've underlined this word metabolize because I have borrowed this from Lucy, thank you, because this word metabolize makes knowledge and learning more individual. It has to go through the biology of one individual person. And when you metabolize the knowledge, you remember it. So if we remember back to that first slide, that student did not metabolize any of that information. Even though we're using Chat, I want students to metabolize something. I want memory to grab hold somewhere. Also, I wanted to provide students with skills that transfer to digital writing and publishing. And along with number 2, I wanted students to begin developing a portfolio that they could use with prospective employers. Okay, how do I get to the next one? Here we go. So this project is, one of its flaws is it's too big and long. 5 weeks, I think, is a really long time. So it's like building a bicycle while running downhill. It's not impossible, but it's very, very, very difficult. So week 1, we watched videos and we read essays. Week 2, we brainstormed. We created titles, key questions. We found sources, their own sources, when they were doing their brainstorming, and they would write them down. I will say that they were developing, during week 2, they're developing a topic about their, like, what is their PSA topic? And generally, each student chose a topic related to their field of study. And so it was something they cared about. I didn't give them the topic. I asked them, it might work best if you're really interested in this topic. Week 3 is really got much harder because that's when they actually had to take their notes and write the PSA body text, which was basically a 300-word mini research paper with brief quotations. Then they asked ChatGPT to rewrite that PSA for an advanced audience and a younger audience, and then write that comparison essay. Week 4 was all about review, revision, refinement. And then week 5, they produced the final PSA poster with complete references. They gave a brief presentation, which I asked them to give us 5 aha moments where they learned something surprising or shocking to them. And that was fun because I wanted students to surprise their fellow students with something they actually learned. So memory became very important, back to the metabolizing the information. I will say week 5 was I asked them to blend the best parts of all 3 of the PSAs. So there's 2 chat GPT versions and 1 was theirs. And I asked them to blend the version at the end and to color code each sentence. Was it their sentence? Was it from the first version, second version, third version? So the final PSA poster, and it wasn't really a poster, it was just a long scrolling text posted to OpenLab. It was great because it was highly colored with all these different colors of where they were getting the different sentences from. So a lot of problems, some solutions. Students did not read enough about their topics. There was a big time crunch, again, 5 weeks, staying organized, and ethics did get lost during this. What I really wanted, I wanted more buy-in, more engagement. I wanted students to lose their fear, guilt, and shame of AI. And so Lucy and her team have helped me think about small improvements to the way I focus on student needs, feelings, and memory. In short, I'm rethinking assessment in layers. Let's see if I can get back in the next one. So, whoops, that was too fast. So hybrid assessment in layers. Most of the grading component for this was basic. Did you do a good job? Was it excellent? And so that idea of correctness was something that I think was holding students back every week. So here are some ideas that I've already implemented and some of them that I'm thinking about implementing. The first thing is I really need to improve my rubric and share it with the students so they know what's going on. Then, 2, I need to connect this rubric to a completion worksheet so that they have in front of them a form where they can say, class 1, did I do this? Class 2, did I do this? Because there's 10 classes. Number 3, introduce an exit questionnaire to pair with the entrance questionnaire. And that's in stars because I do give them an entrance questionnaire. And it's crazy that I have almost 100% completion of the questionnaire. Every student wants to do this questionnaire. So I'm like, it worked so well and we had such a great discussion, why not do an exit questionnaire? That would be completion points. I'm not grading it for content. Number 4, I want to provide fast feedback on one of their drafts. That is probably the heaviest lift on my part, that I have to step in and say, all right, I got to slow myself down and I have to give them feedback on their drafts. Number 5, I already grade their 2 essays on correctness, but now what I'm doing is I'm dialing back the point system or redistributing the points so that they get a certain amount of points for completing the essay. And then they get additional points for doing a good job because I want every student to complete it. And right now, there's too great of a percentage of students that kind of just fall off because of the difficulty of the assignment. Number 6, I want to do, I'm not sure how to do it. I want to introduce teams so that every student is in a team and they can keep track of each other and they can have a more socially aware environment for this big project. Because as I've learned from a lot of my students who have graduated, most really cool careers involve students or recent graduates, they have to work in teams. And so I like that component and I'd like to have my students do more about that. So the key point is I'm not redesigning my whole assignment. What I'm doing is I'm trying to get running down the hill building the bicycle. I'm trying to have students walk slowly as they build the bicycle. So I'm rethinking parts of the assessment. I didn't redesign the whole PSA project. It's really, how do I engage? How do I give feedback? How do I help the students complete this difficult assignment? And so I want to share 4 sentences that were from a really, really wonderful student project from fall of 2024. This student is a dental in the dental hygiene program at City Tech. And these 4 quotes from their final essay, the reflection essay for this project, for me, made everything I'm doing worthwhile. So 4 quotes. During this project, my views on generative AI have changed because I thought using AI was only for cheating. AI has helped me rewrite my original PSA for different audiences and help me understand the importance of the way you give out the message. The 3rd quote, I have learned that it can help dental hygienists improve treatment, improve patient outcome, and help patients learn more about their condition. And then lastly, AI advancement can be seen as bad as it can take over your healthcare provider, but it won't. And I underline that because that sentence right there was my favorite sentence maybe of the whole semester, because that was that student's original voice. That was authentic writing. I would not write that way. I'm not sure if I taught students to write that way, but that was a student really trying to make this idea land with purpose and power. And so I love that, comma, but it won't. And the last sentence, instead, they work together to give the best care for patients with dentistry. AI has been impactful. So imagine in the medical field how much AI can help a patient and improve a doctor's time with each patient. So that to me was a great payoff. Thank you very much for listening and being here during this presentation. I did, of course, have help with this assignment a couple years ago when I got started. I used this wonderful book on next generation genres, teaching writing for civic and academic engagement. And this is the reading list that I shared with my students. So there.
Awesome. I made, yes, yeah. Actually the crowd is going wild, and I think you need to reassure them that you will share your
Yes.
share your deck with everyone,
Yeah,
because
sure.
I think they need to know that. I'm gonna spotlight us, so that you'll share. So I have a couple of just responses for this that I think are really common. The first is for faculty members who are doing something like this, acknowledging the grading load. It is such a shift. It is, if I were a student, I would feel like I was getting a lot more for my money because I was getting constant feedback. But there are ways that we can provide this level of feedback for our students that are not like where we're going to bleed out before the end of the semester. And that is with rubrics, using rubrics especially in the learning management system. And rubrics you can customize. And, when you use a rubric in the system, then it will give some feedback, automatic feedback. And you can customize that a little bit, but your students are getting instant feedback, direction, and probably more than if you sat there trying to grind it out with a pen or an oral thing or whatever. So we have to rethink how we do grading, and to flip around what this grading load looks like, because in the beginning it's quite intimidating. And then the other piece I wanted to address here, and I think the most important piece of what is so exciting about this assignment is the way that you so deftly put together the AI and the student's words, and having the student do critical work to separate those two out. And to acknowledge which were the students' words and which were coming from AI, what was effective, what was not effective, and to reflect on that is super important. One of the things that I say all the time about AI is the less you know about a topic, the better the AI answer sounds. And what's really hard for our students when we are grading on correctness is that they want to just throw a correct thing that sounds correct out there without a lot of critical thought, and they know that somehow AI is going to give correctness. So in flipping this around to talk about completion, right, and to talk about the important thing is discernment about what could you bring to the table and what is AI bringing to the table, you are helping them build that expertise. And that is the thing that we have to do with AI, I think. With writing, it gets a little mucky because it's ideas and these fully formed ideas are popping out of the generative AI. And sometimes students think if they put a prompt in and then they generated something, like, then that's their ideas somehow. So this work that you're having them do is really important because it's modeling what critical use of AI looks like. And the fact that you're adding grades to that is like the most important part, right? Because you're flipping over what the purpose of this class is, right? The purpose of this class is not to give me a shiny, beautiful A essay. The purpose of this class is for you to feel confident in expressing ideas, maybe using supports that your job may ask you to do. So those are my two reactions to that. There are probably other ones from other folks, but what I love about this assignment.
Well, thank you for that. And I just want to let you know that one of the things I've always wished I had more time is to give students more feedback. And this roundtable for me is really great because I feel a little bit like a student over the past week as I've gotten to know Lucy and her team and their work, and also Jose's work, is that I want feedback. And it's often hard to get feedback as a teacher. You have to really search it out. And so I'm hoping that, that at City Tech this continues to grow and teachers can get more feedback for alternative, interesting assignments. As many people who have to teach writing know, the usual old classic research paper is really not that useful in the working world. And I talk to a lot of my friends who are not in academia, and they do writing constantly. But what they tell me is that, like, well, Sean, have you used Slack every single day? What kind of everyday communication system are you on? We have two different systems at my company. We have this email, that email, and we have a third thing. And we have this thing called a postmortem. And I'm like, what's that? And they're like, failed projects, failed products. We have to go through and evaluate, assess, and learn from them. And we can't, I don't use AI for that. I have to meet in a team and talk and write stuff down. So these new types of writing have helped me rethink of what a research paper should be. Because in a postmortem, you could certainly use some research, but you wouldn't just write it up and staple some papers and give it to people. You would probably have a system where everybody would add to one document. So it would be a kind of blended research assignment for a team. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do something that was an alternative kind of research assignment. And I wanted them to just escape the idea that here, I want you to write a paper about Edith Wharton and, and choose three novels, read those three novels, and write a 10-page paper. Students probably would use AI to do the whole thing. So by creating an assignment where they have to do some writing, and then they are not just turning in AI work, but they have to quote from the AI, that's kind of changing the dynamic. Still, students find it difficult, and it is a little bit difficult for me as well.
I see a hand up. I just want to just acknowledge the thing that you said, which is that, and this is the piece I think. I taught writing for 10 years. I'm a literature PhD, all this thing, all the things. So it causes me pain to say these things, but I want to say that the writing what writing represents is destabilized now in our culture, and this idea of we can't, I think, any longer in academia pretend that writing is a thing that comes from my mind and I put forth my ideas and it's my finished thing. Writing is communal now, collaborative, and I think it's always been that way. but now we can acknowledge the inputs, we can acknowledge the other people. And so the writing that happens on Slack or Discord or other places, the idea development, I mean, writing is a big suitcase into which we have idea development and, and counter argument and all that stuff. So I think what you're doing is really important, not just because of what you're acknowledging, but you're acknowledging that writing is changing as a thing. Should we get our question?
Oh,
Yeah, anybody have?
I have one quick question. I want to jump in. I want to take because I think Professor Scanlan, you said something that really caught my attention. You said that you track those aha moments in the class, and I was just wondering, from what you've seen, from those aha moments, were some of those that you had intentionally planted in the class, and you had injected those in the class, and the other from the other end, how many of those aha moments happened authentically within the class? And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that, because I think those aha moments is really what uh, students, when they leave, when the class is over, they take with them as they
Right.
continue on their careers.
I know that a lot of students are taking a composition class and they want to survive it. They're not looking to authentically carry memories into their career. So I can't legitimately say they have to remember every class session. And so I'm hoping they take something from it. That was why I wanted the aha moment. And I will say that at the beginning of the project, when we did our readings, I told them, I said, none of these readings are going to say that AI is going to destroy the world or blow you up or take your job. None of the readings say that. And I said, so at the end of your project, in your presentation, if you say AI is going to take your job and blow you up and nuclear Armageddon, that's not what I'm going for. I want you to tell me, what did you learn about your topic, or quote from the articles. And generally, I just tell students again and again, please keep the aha moments authentic based on your best citations. So I had them choose their favorite article, and I made them put that in a different color, and I made them share that with the whole class. I go, this was the best article. So I really wanted them to draw from something that has been said that was somebody else's authentic idea. I will say that a few students who did not complete the project, when I asked them to give their presentation, they did freeze, and it was kind of like a deer in the headlights moment, and they just did say almost those exact three things. AI is coming for your job, it's going to cause a nuclear war, and you guys need to rewatch The Matrix. And I was like, okay, third point, yes. Rewatch The Matrix, but it's not. The other two are not what I was going for. So I do want more class dynamic. I want more teamwork. I want more sharing. So do I go to 6 weeks? I don't know. It's already kind of too much.
I think Tanya has a question.
Sure.
Actually, I had more of just a sharing kind of thing. You mentioned Edith Wharton in literature. I teach in the communication design department here, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about visual AI, like fireflies and firefly and stuff in a few minutes. But my daughter, who is attending a university in Connecticut, she had a brilliant use, I thought, of not so much incorporating Chat GPT, but an essay that's designed for more authentic learning on the classic literature component, where they read in the class Edith Wharton, Age of Innocence, and then they did a Gatsby too, and a Great Gatsby, Fitzgerald's novel. And the assignment was to write a short creative piece in the style of both of those authors. You could use ChatGPT now to do that, of course. But then the second piece of the assignment was to analyze why they made the choices that they did in both of their short creative pieces. You see, so it was a way, if they used ChatGPT, if they did, they still had to analyze how it related back to the novels thematically. And it was a really interesting choice. And there was a lot of feedback. I know, because because I thought it was an interesting assignment. And so my daughter had shared it with me. It was really a lot of feedback that was given in their version of Brightspace, right? They use a different system. But at City Tech, I was going to say that, and I was going to ask, how much are you using any of the visual AIs? Because I find that that's an easy, I find that that also could be because literature often has a lot of visual imagery that people are doing. And I use the Firefly in my classes in communication design theory, which is a writing class, because we're talking about semiotics. And so you get a lot of, if students put certain kind of, whether you're talking about Adam and Eve and Apple, which we did that search, and you put in Firefly, what you get in your imagery is like really useful for talking about semiotics, because how the AI has been trained from our visual imagery and what kind of stereotypical images you get, just all kinds of things. So that was my question, was how much of the other types of, besides the, the visual AIs are you using? Yeah.
Well, I can say that we do this as an exercise of a team member who, when he does AI literacy workshops, he will take one that they do is the description of the monster from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And the other one that they do is the description of Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights. And like it's very interesting, the racial encoding on some of these, or the lack of racial encoding, how it will peel out to look at Hollywood versions of things rather than looking at the actual. So I am going to butcher what he does, but they do do Frankenstein, and then they actually put in the text from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and look at the very different. So as you said, semiotics, it's great to talk about how different configurations of language and how things are trained. But I think the important piece that you're getting at, which is also what Sean's amazing assignment does, is that we are talking about the AI as a constructed machine that we are using to do particular things, right? That it's not a magic genie. It's not a wish fulfiller. It's not something that knows you better than you know yourself. It is a machine that we can use for particular purposes and then judge what the outputs of those purposes are.
Oh, I also want to jump in there because I just came back from an Adobe conference where the presenter was sharing with us a student who was taking an astronomy course. And just like Tanya mentioned, the professor asked the students to use Firefly. And with Firefly, they had to, in this case, the student had to generate an image using Firefly of something about the stars or something in astronomy. And then the student looked at the image that was generated on Firefly and then noticed there were problems or issues with the image that were not correct. And so then she used that for critical thinking, and the student had to now look at the GenAI image and then analyze it and realize, wait a second, this is not correct. And then the student had to go back into Adobe Firefly to then make adjustments on the prompt to then produce an image that was much more accurate to what the image should have generated. So that was my little assignment on Adobe Firefly. Thank you, Tanya, because you reminded me of that.
Thank you, Tanya. That's an amazing way to use AI. I really appreciate that. I have a couple quick things to say. One is that in the assignment I teach in my Comp 2 class, we don't get into visuals, but yet that's not totally true because we're using OpenLab as the CMS, that they're already visualizing a digital world and they're writing in it and they're using it and they're using whatever typography, spacing that they can use. I don't ask them to use images or video because I'm afraid already the 5 weeks is getting a little too much. But I might, in fact, someday do that maybe in a different class. So I'd like to maybe collaborate with you on a more advanced class. I teach in the professional and technical writing program. I teach the professional editing class. And in that class, we do talk about semiotics, typography, and we end the semester with doing we critique websites, not only just for language and message, but also for layout and visuals. And we get a little bit into AI, but not much yet.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, no, definitely. I'd love
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, the students really, what they find when they use the AI, just the little bits that they're doing, they're so amazed at how the audience changes everything. And they're like, but Professor Scanlan, how did that happen? Why, when I put in change the audience, why does it read so differently? So that's, for me, super helpful, because then we can say, well, what is the tone? What is addiction? What words are they changing? Why are they changing sentence length? Why is everything the same but different? And then it gets us into a discussion of how important language and every word matters. So
I
it's
just
that for
want
that it's good. It's enough.
I just want to say that's what mastery in a class like this looks like, is asking those questions, right? Is flipping over our perception of mastery to asking the right questions.
Oh, Jose.
We have a question from Professor Ong, or comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to pick up on first of all, thank you for that discussion and for sharing your work on assessment. So I just wanted to pick up on a point.
Oh, you're mute.
We can't hear you.
You're mute, Professor
Okay,
Ong.
sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on a point that Lucy made about performance versus completion. So for a long time, because I have a background in finance, I knew that the world that students will be graduating into is very different from what they do in college. So I've always had a forward-looking approach to the assignments I give students. Um, the one thing that I am worried about, so I'm more or less just posing this kind of challenge for you to comment on. And just to give you a context, I actually worked for an AI firm recently for training LLMs, and I'm part of this expert team, an expert contributor team. We are supposed to develop questions that would stump the AI. Um, and it's interesting that many of the expert contributors did the job, but they did not apply the criteria correctly. Right? So the project overall suffered. And I find that to be rather pervasive in the workplace. So that relates back to the question of performance versus completion. Because on the one hand, I understand why students should be assessed on completion, but I also want to know, I guess, your views on how we can teach students to not actually learn the criteria. The more that they could explicitly mention it, that I'm probably more suspicious. But so to internalize it, so that they can actually execute the criteria in their work. And then just to follow one follow up question. Recently, I gave a rubric. So this is again picking up on your point about rubric. I gave a rubric for a business ethics course that listed very specific um, criteria. And yet I got an email from a student asking me, how did I grade the assignment? And the criteria are in English, right? So and they're very accessible English. So I don't, yeah. So sorry, that was maybe a bit long, but
Oh.
Sean,
Does anybody want to?
yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing is like, it really does depend on your student body in terms of where they come from on rubrics. So at NYU, we've got traditional 18 to 18 and up students, and they have had many of them had Common Core, and they were exposed to rubrics. I'm the parent of a 20-year-old who told me a few years ago that a writing assignment wasn't real because it didn't have a rubric, and I was like, when you come to college, things could get ugly. I think it really depends on where students are coming from and their background in terms of how they interpret rubrics. But I feel like we could embrace rubrics in a different way, because rubrics are like, I think for us as professionals or experts, it's kind of like, oh, this is my criteria I'm writing down for you. But I love your second question, Professor Ong, because I think that is the point. If we're going to do this in a student-centered way, we need to give them that rubric as, here's the thing you can take with you in the world. Here's how people who are looking at your business writing or your other stuff will evaluate. Here are the things that they're going to look for. And so how do we make that rubric more real life language so that they can metabolize that, right? That they can say, here is my thing that I can use. I can go back to this rubric. This is not CYA from my professor, right? But this is actually a handbook for me to take from this class and in that case, if you are using the rubric, like just wearing it out, right? If you're using it in every class period, if you are doing practice evaluation according to the rubric, right? And you're not changing the rubric around all the time, but you are using that rubric, you can embrace it. But thank you so much for that question, because it really made me think differently about rubrics. I'm coming from the academic side. I'm thinking about it as like, this is your brain dump. Yeah, I love this. Someone just said in the chat, they turned the value rubrics into student speak. If you don't know, the American Association of Colleges and Universities has a fabulous rubric project, but it's definitely like you put a bunch of academics in a room and got them to generate some rubrics, right? I don't even know what they mean. Go ahead, Sean.
So yeah, thank you, Professor Ong. That was really timely. A couple of things. One, between the ideas of completion and correctness, for me, the idea is feedback, and that's where rubrics can help me. And feedback takes a lot of time, I understand. But one thing I have done, and I know that that a lot of people don't exactly like the using examples for students, but this has been helpful for me because students don't have a lot of experience with a 5-week project. And so I give them 2 examples. An example of the 5-week project that turned out really well, and then one that did not turn out well. And I have the students, we talk about why this one was good and why this one was not so good, so they can see what they look like. I also give they're on topics that are outside of AI safety, because I want them to talk about AI safety in their fields. These examples are different, so it forces them to say, oh, I can't just take this and rewrite it, because the theme and topic is very different. So examples have been helpful for that particular assignment, and I know that there's definitely some good academic research on the use of examples, and then the counterclaim that examples can hurt student performance and memory.
I want to add to that too, real quick. Something we always struggle is with the students' fixation on grades, right? Constantly going to Brightspace, going to grades, and just, Professor, where's my grade, or what's going on, and constantly, that fixation. But with rubrics, you flip the table. I feel that now you're kind of putting the focus on the mastery of the assessment, right? So now we're focusing on what and the why of the assessment, right? What is that you should be learning, as opposed to, I want to get this 80, I want to get the 90, So I love rubrics for that reason, because it's almost like ungrading. Lucy touched on it. It's tough to do, to change that mindset, but I think it's rewarding, because the other issue with grading is the fact that sometimes the pressure of getting a certain grade leads to cheating. And so, those are some of my take on that.
I think that's such an important point, and it goes back to Professor Ong's point, which is a grade is a shorthand way of saying that I know X or I know Y, right? But we all know that that freshman composition, for example, is vastly different from place to place. So an A is almost meaningless in that sense. But a rubric and a rubric that has the right language to describe what students actually did, that's useful for them, right? That is the descriptive level. And I feel like that's sort of also why students like badges. Because badges are like super specific about, I did this thing and I know this thing and this thing, and what if we could say that for first year writing? Like, what if we could say that for particular types of classes? If a student could say, and it also flips it around from like, I'm doing this for you. The thing that used to make me the maddest at the system, not at the student, is when students would say, like, I don't know what you want from this paper. And I'm like, I don't want any, it's a universal, there's a universal out there. And so I want you to want this thing, right? And I'm just like, we're in the wrong system. I see a bunch of hands, so.
Professor Goltz, you want to go ahead?
Oh, sure. What I was going to say is, and it comes back to this idea of the professional side. Before I came to the college, I worked for Scientific American for 8 years and then US News and World Report. Both of those magazines never published anything first draft, ever. Absolutely not. And even though now I was doing that in the 90s, right, and early, and the thing is, even now, if you were at a monthly magazine, you still wouldn't publish first draft. You wouldn't go through 5 drafts like we used to do in the 90s because it's a faster cycle in general because you have a website, right? So it's a little different. But I would say that the interesting challenge, because I've always worked since I started doing the writing intensive with draft and revision with my students at ComD. But the thing that I found challenging, is someone asked about this, is, okay, so you had the feedback issue, of course, and I allow 3 drafts. I've played a lot with timing on certain kinds of things, but what I find is if you're open about you really only grade the second draft, then the first draft gets really short shrift, right? Because that's like the nature of students, it just seemed. So what I started to do, and then, of course, there's the feedback first draft, second draft, and then you're doing a third draft, right? And I'll allow sometimes a fourth if I see a paper that we want to maybe publish in a certain way on. But the thing is, I found that for first draft, what I now do is verbal feedback in the classroom, because in the ComD side of the house for design projects, you always did a crit in the classroom of certain kinds of design work. And so that was verbal, right? And so I do that, and I do it during individual time when we have a break, they're working on other things around to students. And I found that to be very helpful, with the second draft being the one where they get the rubric, right? And that's all the feedback that they get. And then the third draft, you use the same rubric. So, but I wondered how people, like, when do you use your rubric? Is it on, that kind of thing? And how many drafts do you, that's what I'm curious about. Yeah.
For me, so a lot of these, my layered assessment is in process right now. That previously I would use the rubric at the end, even though I had some completion points built in to the assignment throughout the 5 weeks, but I really was more focused on getting students to the very end, and that really is. So I think that like 30% of students did well, 30% of students did okay and pass, and then 20% of the students did not do well and did not really finish the assignment. And I want to change those percentages, and while also just like maintaining my sense of sanity and time balance. I probably will now do more feedback in the middle to keep students along, and I will work on the rubric during the first couple of weeks rather than wait to the end and say, all right, did everybody conform to the rubric? That's my change. And I'm here to say, like, my assignment needed help because I didn't have the buy-in that I thought I would get and I wanted.
Okay.
Let's take one more question before we close. Professor Ong, you have a comment or question?
if no one else has their hand up. So I actually thought that your point, Jose, was I mean that didn't even occur to me, but I felt that in this particular instance that I shared, the grade did get in the way. And here's the thing, it's funny that students would say, "Could you explain how you apply the rubric, or could you explain how you graded the assignment so that I can improve my work in the future?" And I would spend an inordinate amount of time giving them feedback via email. And then I find out later they didn't even apply it to feature work, right? And so one thing that I find useful, so now when I reply to this student, I do have some ammunition, because this rubric is for a corporate meeting that they stage, and right, it's a board meeting. And so at the end of the board meeting, I did ask them, how do you think, what did you do well as a board, right? And what could you have improved as a board? And I find that students were fairly sincere and self-critical, except that, this student didn't, obviously did not incorporate that in asking me the question, how did you grade this? Because grading they compartmentalize it, right? They don't associate the grade with the
Right.
rubric. Yeah. And so I guess my question is, I know there's a collective action problem with respect to ungrading. Lucy, maybe you want to comment on that. Where do we stand in higher education with respect to that collective action problem?
Yeah, I always tell folks who are doing alternative grading, you are countercultural. Like you are running against every force that's out there. I did include in my slides a very interesting article that ran in the Chronicle like yesterday, I think, about grading and grading integrity, and how it's being pulled in two different directions around political standpoints. But I think we have a little bit of a problem, right? Because we also need to give a kind of proxy for students' performance, right? Those folks that go to UC Santa Cruz and get like the handwritten thing, nobody reads that. And all of the people that have the portfolios, all that beautiful work, nobody reads that. And they don't have the language, and they don't have the language to represent themselves. So we've got to have some type of proxy for student performance. You might argue that we already do, right? Like that the students' resumes that they build, internships, the real authentic application of what they're learning is probably stronger than the proxy of grades. But often grades are just used as a proxy for like cutoffs, for interviews. I can't even believe it. I mean, like I'm old as dirt, but when I was doing my resume the first time, I never put a GPA on there, and students have to put GPAs on everything. It's like their social security number or something like that. So
ATS has changed the game on that.
yeah. So who has changed? Sorry.
ATS, application tracking systems. They're the AI that scans all the resumes. In the design world, it used to be your portfolio.
Yeah.
Now there's a column, it's automated systems. You put your GPA, and that will kick a design student out possibly before they even get to the portfolio. That is a sea change, as is how they prepare their resumes because of the new, So I know it's a different thing.
So it's even worse countercultural. So I think we're at a place where we're in one of these places where we have to do a lot of work on the academic side to come up with something that can also be a good proxy for student work that people are actually going to read. I mean, what's ironic is that AI can actually read that student portfolio. It could actually read those crazy UC Santa Cruz report cards and come up with a good summary about the student, right? So AI might be our friend in this, in that we could move to a more descriptive form of student performance that could be summarized by AI. But that is like way beyond my pay grade or anything that I get to think about at all. So I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I think like we're still going to be countercultural, but it's so important to do the work because the work is for our students and for their sense of confidence and for their integrity and understanding of their own learning. And so it's always worthwhile to do that work.
Also, a quick response to Professor Ong. What many times I hear from faculty members, I gave them an opportunity to turn in the paper, get an opportunity to correct and change the paper for extra points, and a lot of them didn't take the opportunity and just didn't want to, go back and rewrite the paper. And that goes back to points, grades, right? Because they're not looking at the key learning, what you're measuring here with this assessment. They're looking at the grade again as a distractor, like you mentioned, Professor Ong. Another professor that used to work closely at a previous institution, I love this phrase he would use every time. He was a professor, and he would say, when students would ask, "Why did you give me this grade?" he would in return and say to the student, "I didn't give you a grade. You earned this grade," right? And so the idea that you're giving me a grade is another going back to the point of grading. But one last thing I want to mention is also backward design framework. I think is key, because if you haven't heard backward design, basically the purpose is, instead of building a lesson plan, you first start with what you're looking to assess the student, right? So that you have perfect alignment with the assessment and the learning objectives, right? So there has to be an alignment between learning objectives and the assessment that you're placing before them. And so those are the mastery that Lucy mentioned earlier. That's what you're trying to master, right? So it's important to align those learning objectives with the assessments that you're putting in front of your students. But then again, you have to shift that mindset where students just believe that, okay, I'm gonna do the minimal amount of work for a particular grade. What's the minimal amount that I can do for that particular grade? So that's the mindset that we have to shift. I think we went a little over, but this is a great way to end. I just want to thank Lucy and Professor Scanlan. I think that was just an amazing talk. I do want to mention real quick before we close the next talk, and I think the next speaker is actually in the audience. Let's see. Yes, Professor Johan Thiel from City Tech. We are going to have the next talk, AI Roundtable Talks, Ethics and Integrity. That would be so we're gonna go right at it, And so we have that would be Friday, November 14, same time, same place. So that's November 14 at 11:30 a.m. Dr. Johan Thiel from City Tech is the Associate Professor of Mathematics at New York City College of Technology. He has now taken on the role of the Director of Academic Integrity at City Tech. And joining Johan, we have Dr. Victoria Mullaney Brown from Columbia University, who is the Director of Academic Integrity at Columbia University. So feel free to join us for that talk as we continue our journey with generative AI in higher education.